Okay, so picture this my dream cottage, the one I'd been saving for forever. Suddenly snatched away by my cousin Archie, who literally overbid just to see me squirm. Yeah, it hurt. And yeah, he was grinning like the villain in a movie. But here's the thing, what he didn't know is that I had a little secret plan brewing. Trust me, it gets wild. Stick around, because what happens next is pure chaos. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The auction hall was a thick, almost suffocating mix of stale coffee and nervous sweat. Honestly, it felt like the air itself was pressing against my back, heavy and humid. But I refused to take off my blazer. I needed to look professional. I needed to look like I belonged here, even though my stomach was doing gymnastics that would have won a gold medal. Beside me, Tristan squeezed my hand, a firm, grounding grip that whispered, "You've got this." He knew exactly what this meant. We had sacrificed for years to get here, skipping vacations, living frugally, saving every spare cent for this exact moment. "Emma," he murmured, leaning in, voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "And we have the budget. We've done the inspections. It's practically yours." My eyes stayed glued to the projection screen at the front of the room, where lot 4002, the seashell cottage, was displayed. To anyone else, it was a disastrous sagging roof, shingles peeling like old skin, porch tilting dangerously. But to me, a landscape architect used to seeing potential in broken spaces, it was perfect. The angle of the view over that empty, weed-choked strip of land, flawless. This was the only property in the county with a completely unobstructed ocean view, or so I thought. The auctioneer's booming voice pulled me out of my reverie. "Next up, lot 42. Opening bid at 200,000. My paddle, number 114, felt heavy in my hand. But I raised it. "I have 200. Do I see 210, 210 to the gentleman in the back?" he called. The bidding started slow. Most developers ignored it. The lot was too small for a condo, and the historic designation made renovations a headache. But that was my advantage. I knew the zoning laws better than anyone. I knew the ins and outs of the historical society. I had done my homework, and we hit 300,000. Then 350. My maximum. My everything, 425,000, was all on the table. And then, almost like a movie scene, the double doors at the back slammed open, heads turned. The auctioneer paused mid-sentence, and there he was, Archie, sunglasses indoors, suit way too expensive, strutting in like the center of the universe. My blood ran cold. He didn't even look at the crowd. He scanned, found me, and that slow, oily grin stretched across his face. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, voice smooth, carrying across the hall. "Paddle in hand," he said, 400,000. My lungs seemed to deflate. He jumped 50 grand in a single breath. Tristan stiffened beside me. "Wait," he lied. He told the family he was in Dubai. I whispered, voice trembling. 410. Archie didn't look at the auctioneer. He looked at me, pulling his sunglasses down the bridge of his nose, and winked. "Fort W," he said. That was it. That was my cap. I couldn't go higher without bankrupting us. Archie barked out a laugh. "Oh, come on, Emma. Is that really all you brought? Let's make this interesting. 475. A gasp swept through the room. The auctioneer blinked, recovered. Sensing the commission spike, 475 to the gentleman in the Italian suit. Do I hear 480 Archie's eyes were still on me? Not the screen, not the pictures of the cottage. He was staring directly at me. He knew exactly how much I had saved. He knew this was my dream, and he was buying it just to crush it. The auctioneer droned going once. I looked at Tristan. His face was pale, shaking his head slightly. We couldn't do it. We literally couldn't. Going twice. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and humiliating. I lowered my paddle. Sold to bidder number 205 for $475,000. The gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Archie clapped. Victorious. He sauntered over, bypassing assistants, looming over my chair. Tough break? 'Cause, he said, flashing those perfect veneers. But honestly, you did me a favor. I needed a place to park cash. The view's going to be worth millions once I tear it down. Don't worry, I'll invite you to the housewarming. You can park the cars. He laughed, patting Tristan's shoulder condescendingly, and walked off to sign the papers. I sat, frozen, nauseous. This wasn't just about losing a house. It was betrayal wrapped in privilege, a slap in the face with 10 years of savings. The drive home was silent, not the comforting silence Tristan and I usually shared, but thick, heavy, morning silence. Rain had started, turning the world gray to match the pit in my stomach. At the apartment, I didn't even remove my shoes. I collapsed onto the sofa. Tristan brought tea, tried to soothe, but it wasn't just about the money. It was that spot, the ridge, the sunset, the view. I had the blueprints in my head. He just didn't care. My phone buzzed. Family group chat. Archie had posted a selfie, the sold sign behind him. Aunt Carol chimed in, proud of him, calling it brilliant business. I spat the phone aside. Hobbies. That's what my life's work had become in their eyes. Tristan brought me a mug, tried to comfort me, reminding me we'll always figure it out, but it wasn't that simple. The call came. Archie. I shouldn't have answered. Tristan warned me, but I needed to hear it. His voice was loud, cutting through the static of my anger. No hard feelings. Business is business. Right, I could feel the trembling in my own voice. Trying to stay cold, that's not business. That's stupidity. He laughed. Dismissive pocket change. He was standing on the porch, looking at the ocean he'd bought for himself. To him, it was magnificent. He'd tear the shack down, put up a modern marvel, triple story of glass, facing the water, and double his money. The jewel of the coastline. He called it, I repeated it quietly, incredulous. The jewel, unobstructed views, he went on. You can't put a price on an infinite horizon. My heart hammered. Wait, that phrasing, infinite horizon, something clicked. I traced the property lines, examined the zoning PDFs. Lot 4003, that narrow, ugly, can-overlook strip in front of his porch. Buildable. Legally. Useless for a house due to setbacks and septic, but perfect for what I realized slowly, a wall. A vertical, living privacy wall that could obliterate his ocean view. Tristan leaned in, disbelief clear in his eyes. Emma, that lot's right in front of his porch, directly in front, I confirmed, a slow smile forming. He never looks at details, I whispered. Archie had made a critical mistake. The betrayal, the humiliation, the gut punch, it all reversed into adrenaline, into the thrill of strategy, the auction, the loss. All the years of frustration funneled into a single, brilliant idea. And it began to take shape. Lot 43, a quiet purchase under an LLC. no one the wiser. Plans drafted, blueprints circled, the revenge carefully orchestrated. This wasn't just a fence, it was a vertical garden, a biodiversity windbreak, pollinator habitat, a legal, towering structure 20 feet high. It would block his view completely, and under zoning, it was perfectly compliant. That night, plotting with Tristan, sketching and laughing quietly at the thought of him scrambling, I finally felt the thrill of being back in control. And we would wait, bide our time, until he was fully leveraged into his flashy glass box. Every dollar spent, every loan taken, before the first post even hit the ground. And then, it was on, Monday morning, thick coastal mist, the silence shattered by a diesel engine. Trucks arrived, massive augers, lumber stacked high. The foreman ready, Archie appeared in a bathrobe, flailing, yelling over the engines. "Private property," he screamed. Mike, the foreman, clipboard in hand, calmly responded, "We're on lot 43. Archie went red, confused, panic mounting. I stepped out of the car, voice steady, "They're not on your lawn." "Archie, they're on mine?" He froze, looked up at the towering posts, then at the house dependent on that view. "You can't," he whispered. "Technically," I said, "I am enhancing the view. A wall of sustainable English ivy." He sputtered. Threats flying, lawyers called, police involved. I stayed calm, overseeing every screw, every planter box, the chaos of him clawing at control around us. By day 3, his family was texting, calling, pleading. I ignored it all. The structure was magnificent, imposing, compliant, and it blocked his view entirely. I watched Archie's panic evolve into complete helplessness. He was leveraged, he was trapped, and I had the high ground literally and figuratively. Every reaction, every gasp, every futile attempt to fight it was like watching the world finally tilt in my favor. And through it all, Tristan at my side, steady, laughing quietly when Archie realized he had no leverage, no escape. Every overbid, every smug grin, every family interference, I'd turned it all into a precise, patient victory. It wasn't just about winning the auction anymore. It was about strategy, timing, and understanding the law better than anyone else in the room. Archie had bought a dream, but I owned the map, the survey, the leverage, and he had no idea the storm heading for him had already been mapped out long before he ever raised his paddle. After that gut punch of the auction, I couldn't stop thinking about that view, Archie's smug little face staring at me as if he'd won the lottery with my dream. I was scrolling through the property maps again, half in disbelief, half out of sheer stubbornness. And then it hit me. That strip of land in front of his new glass box lot 4003, it wasn't part of his property. It was a separate parcel, narrow, ugly, completely overlooked, but still technically buildable. My pulse jumped. I zoomed in, scrutinizing the boundaries like a detective. The cottage sat up on a rise, perfect for his view, but that lower strip, all scrub and rocks, had been ignored for decades. It hadn't been touched in 50 years. Everyone assumed it was just conservation land, but the zoning codes told a different story. R2 residential non-conforming, useless for a full house. Sure, the septic and setbacks made a traditional dwelling impossible, but it could still host an accessory structure, and I knew exactly what that meant. Tristan leaned over my shoulder, eyebrows raised. "Can you really build anything there?" I looked at the numbers, measuring setbacks, calculating heights, imagining exactly what I could do. Not a standard house, no bedrooms, nothing big, nothing flashy, but a structure, a wall, a vertical garden, a living, legal barrier right in front of his prized ocean view. My heart started racing, adrenaline rushing like a river through my veins. "He thinks he owns the view," I whispered, "but he doesn't own the land beneath it." Tristan was quiet for a moment, then said, "Emma, that lot is right in front of his porch." Directly in front, I nodded, tracing the boundary lines on the map with my finger. His face went pale. The possibilities hit us both at once. He had no idea. Archie never looks at the details. That's his fatal flaw. And I had the detail, the map, the law, everything I needed to flip the script. My mind spun, calculating how this could work. A vertical garden, 20 feet high, planted densely enough to block his panoramic view, but entirely legal. We could build it under accessory structure rules, setback rules, zoning law. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about leverage, about using the rules he ignored to our advantage. Tristan leaned back in his chair, smirking despite the tension. "You're serious, right? I can't believe you see this as a positive, but I do." My excitement was tinged with that guilty thrill you get when a plan starts to crystallize, when chaos meets opportunity. I could feel the old fury from the auction, that burn of betrayal, channeling into cold, precise plotting. This was different from childhood squabbles or petty fights. This was strategy, patience, law, and creativity rolled into one, and Archie was completely blind to it. I scrolled through the zoning documents again. The lot was R2 residential non-conforming. Accessory structures allowed up to 20 feet as long as it included a living element, like a vertical garden. Perfect. I could legally plant something huge, dense, and living right along the ridge of his view. He'd see the wall, not the ocean, and there would be nothing he could do about it. Tristan's eyes were wide now, and I could feel him thinking ahead to construction logistics, budget, and timing. "Are you sure this works?" he asked, voice low. "I'm sure. I double-checked everything: property lines, setbacks, structural possibilities. Every detail fit perfectly. He doesn't know the land's buildable. And if we play it right, we can move silently, quietly, and with full legal protection." My pulse was still pounding, but it wasn't panic anymore. It was pure exhilaration. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about control, about turning the tables on someone who thought he could trample over me. We leaned over the iPad together, discussing heights, placements, the width of the structure. I imagined thick vertical panels, lush greenery, climbing ivy, maybe even flowering plants that would block the sightline but enhance the land. Tristan was already calculating load-bearing needs, anchoring systems, everything a structural engineer dreams about. The combination of our expertise, my landscape architecture, his engineering made the plan feel unstoppable. He looked at me, half in disbelief, half impressed. "This is insane." I smiled. "Maybe, but it works. And I've waited years for a shot like this." The rush was intoxicating. Every detail of Archie's personality, his arrogance, his blindness to rules, came rushing back in vivid relief. The way he overbid just to humiliate me. The way he always had to have the bigger bike, the better grades, the flashier car, the golden boy complex, the years of being handed victory by default. All of it stacked up in my favor here. Tristan shook his head, grinning. So what's the plan? We buy the lot quietly, under a generic LLC, he said. Coastal Preservation Partners or something. Archie won't even think twice. His mind is already consumed by that glass box he's building. And we wait. Patience is key. Let him sink into his 3-story, ultra-modern monstrosity. Leverage himself completely. And when he's fully invested, we break ground. I trace the elevation markers on the map with my finger. Every post, every panel, every vertical foot of that wall would be strategically placed to block his view while staying perfectly within the law. I could almost see it already. The hedge rising, the vertical garden taking shape, his furious face behind the glass. Powerless. Tristan laughed quietly. That's kind of brilliant, dangerous, but brilliant. And that's when I realized just how much satisfaction there would be in this. Not cruelty, exactly not revenge for revenge's sake, but the pure, calculated, unstoppable justice of it. We could do this silently, legally, and turn his overconfidence against him. My mind kept running through every step. Purchase the lot under the LLC. Wait until construction begins on the glass house. Use our expertise to design the vertical garden wall. Ensure it is lush, legal, and strategically positioned. Allow him to invest millions, leverage loans, borrow against assets. And then, when he finally admires his view, it's gone. All he'll see is living greenery, vertical panels, 20 feet of pure obstruction. My stomach did a little flip of excitement. Tristan leaned closer, whispering, "You realize you're turning his dream into a nightmare." "Yeah," I said, "but it's more than that. I'm reclaiming mine." The sense of empowerment was dizzying. The land, the law, our skill, the timing, everything aligned. Archie's hubris was the key, his arrogance the fuel. I spent the rest of the evening poring over every detail, access points, soil stability, irrigation possibilities, planting schedules. We could stagger construction to avoid notice, keep costs low, and maximize the dramatic reveal. This was going to be slow, careful, meticulous, and that made it sweeter. Finally, Tristan leaned back, exhausted but grinning. I can't wait to see his face. I can't either, I said, heart pounding. But more than that, I felt calm, calculated. The auction loss had transformed into opportunity. Betrayal had become strategy. And in that moment, staring at the map, tracing the boundaries, visualizing the garden wall, I knew the tables had officially turned. So, after we discovered that little slice of land in front of Archie's dream cottage, Tristan and I started plotting, quietly and methodically. The first step was to secure the lot without raising a single eyebrow. We didn't want Archie or the family catching wind of it, so I suggested we form a generic LLC, something nondescript. Coastal windbreak solutions, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed revenge. Just a simple, professional front to buy the property cleanly, quietly, under the radar. Tristan handled the paperwork, checking each detail to make sure the LLC was legitimate, legal, airtight. I double-checked the public records to confirm the lot had no surprises, no hidden easements, no conservation claims that could blow our plan apart. Every box ticked felt like a little victory, a quiet thrill, a sense that we were finally taking control after years of watching Archie bulldoze through life, thinking he was untouchable. Once the purchase was settled, the real fun began. I spread out the property survey, the topography maps, and the zoning PDFs across the kitchen table. Tristan leaned over my shoulder, coffee in hand, and I could feel that mix of excitement and disbelief in the room. "Can you believe this is actually ours?" he asked. I grinned, tracing the property lines. We were sitting on a gold mine of strategic potential. We had a narrow strip of land, legally buildable under accessory structure rules, right in front of Archie's 3-story glass palace. And the best part, it was completely invisible to him until we acted. I started sketching, ideas flowing faster than I could keep up. Vertical garden panels, lush ivy, climbing plants, pollinator-friendly species, all stacked in a way that was both aesthetically pleasing and completely functional as a site blocker. Tristan interrupted my frenzy with a laugh. "You're insane, but it's brilliant." I shrugged, biting back a grin. "Maybe, but it works. It's patient, careful, legal, and it's exactly the kind of payoff I've been craving since that auction." We spent hours planning, arguing over dimensions, setbacks, structural supports, irrigation. Every detail mattered. Height, width, plant density, soil composition. We had to make it perfect. Not just for the effect on Archie, but for the long-term sustainability of the lot. I kept imagining the look on his face when he finally saw it. Calm, smug, thinking he owned the horizon, and then bam, 20 feet of lush, living greenery staring back at him. That thought alone made me pause and laugh quietly to myself. Tristan leaned back, shaking his head. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Maybe, but it's not just revenge. It's strategy. It's patience. It's finally playing the long game." And it felt damn good. By the time we had the design sketched and the contractor list ready, a sense of calm satisfaction had settled over us. Every minute we waited, every penny we carefully allocated, every post and planter box was going to hit precisely where it needed to. I couldn't help thinking about the years of sacrifices, the frugal dinners, the rattling old car, the late nights of research and work. It all funneled into this moment. This was our move, calculated and precise. We weren't just reacting, we were orchestrating. Tristan and I even went over the schedule, timing everything so that construction would coincide with Archie's peak investment in his glass monstrosity. We'd wait until he had poured himself fully into the renovation, leveraged himself completely, and then we'd act. Timing was everything. I remember pointing at the topographic lines, imagining the structure rising from the slope, lush panels gradually filling in the view from his living room, the ocean hidden behind a wall of green. The more I visualized it, the more adrenaline pumped through me. Every setback, every planning document, every late-night discussion felt like a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Tristan grinned. "So basically, we're about to ruin his $1,000,000 view with a bunch of plants. Essentially," I said, a little more seriously than I intended, "we're creating a living, legal structure that enhances the environment, preserves native species, and, oh yeah, blocks his view entirely. And it's all above board, all legal, all ours." Tristan shook his head again, laughing. "I can't believe this is actually happening." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the planning lift off me a little. This was patience, strategy, execution. We were finally the ones in control. The quiet satisfaction of having the law, the lot, and the plan on our side was intoxicating. And it wasn't just about beating Archie. It was about finally stepping into our own power, showing that careful thought, experience, and strategy could outmaneuver brash arrogance. I sketched elevations, sections, and cross-sections, marking where each panel would go, how high, how dense, how it would grow over the months. Tristan provided engineering input, making sure everything could be anchored safely, withstand coastal winds, and remain compliant with zoning restrictions. It was meticulous, but it was exhilarating. Each measurement, each adjustment, each tweak of the plan brought us closer to the sweet satisfaction of the final reveal. Hours turned into days as we refined everything. Materials lists, contractor notes, irrigation plans, plant species charts, timelines. We covered every detail, and all the while, there was this low, buzzing excitement in the background. This wasn't just revenge, it was mastery. We were taking the loss from the auction and transforming it into an unstoppable, quiet triumph. I remember sitting back at one point, staring at the fully detailed plans spread across the table and letting myself imagine the moment it would be revealed to Archie. The look on his face, the panic, the sudden realization that his perfect, expensive, leveraged dream was going to have a living, legal barrier shoved directly in front of it. The thought made me giggle quietly, a little giddy, a little vindicated. Tristan nudged me, grinning. "Stop smiling. You sound insane." I couldn't help it. Maybe I am a little insane. But the beauty was in the planning. We weren't reckless. We weren't vindictive for the sake of it. We were careful, methodical, completely legal, and entirely satisfying. Every post, every panel, every climbing plan was part of a bigger picture. A story where the arrogant one finally gets a taste of patience, precision, and strategy. And best of all, we didn't need anyone to know until it was too late. We were hidden, quiet, unassuming, like shadows moving in the background while Archie strutted in his glass castle. It was a rare kind of power, the calm, calculated, inevitable kind. And the anticipation, I realized, was almost as sweet as the reveal itself. Tristan looked at me, still smiling but now more thoughtful. "You realize once we start building, there's no going back, right?" I nodded. "I know." And that's exactly the point. The plan was set. The LLC held the lot. The designs were finalized. Contractors were ready. Every detail accounted for. Every contingency considered. And Archie, he had no idea. The emotional payoff of knowing the high-handed auction winner would soon have his expensive view literally blocked by our careful, legal, and beautifully designed vertical garden was almost overwhelming. The planning process had turned what started as humiliation into excitement, strategy, and a kind of artistry. We weren't just building a wall, we were building a statement. A reminder that experience, patience, and intelligence could outmaneuver money and arrogance. And when the first post went into the ground, I knew it would be worth every careful, deliberate step we'd taken. All the late nights, all the spreadsheets, all the planning sessions, it was all for this. And the best part, we got to watch it unfold in slow, perfect precision. One panel, one planter, 1 inch at a time, turning our quiet planning into a tangible, inevitable triumph that Archie could never anticipate. And in that moment, I felt the satisfaction of turning loss into control, of transforming a gut punch into a strategic victory, of finally seeing the power of careful planning and patience pay off in the most deliciously satisfying way. Monday morning broke with that heavy, muffling coastal mist, the kind that makes the world feel small and quiet, almost secretive. I parked a little down the road, coffee in a thermos in hand, binoculars pressed to my eyes, and waited. The flatbed truck rumbled down the narrow lane, carrying a massive hydraulic auger, the kind of drill that could sink pilings deep into the earth. Behind it, a lumber truck stacked with 6x6 pressure-treated posts, each 22 feet tall, loomed like silent giants. My heart was pounding, a mix of adrenaline, satisfaction, and disbelief. Archie's glass house gleamed beyond the mist, perfectly aligned with the strip of land that would soon change everything. And then, chaos. The front door of the vista, his so-called masterpiece, flew open. Archie burst out in a bathrobe, screaming, arms flailing. I could barely make out what he was yelling over the roar of the diesel engines. "Private property. You can't park here, you'll be arrested." His voice cracked, high and desperate, like a man seeing the ground slip beneath him. The foreman, like a solid, calm presence I had worked with on 3 commercial projects before, just looked at him, clipboard in hand. "We're on lot 43, buddy," he said. "We have a work order. There's nothing illegal here." Archie went red, a mixture of rage and disbelief, almost slipping in the wet grass. I stepped out of my car slowly, deliberately, letting the door thud behind me. I adjusted my raincoat and said calmly, "They're not on your lawn, Archie. They're on mine." He froze, his brain misfiring. He looked at the towering posts, then back at his glass palace. "You can't," he whispered, voice cracking. "Technically," I said, "I'm enhancing the view. A wall of sustainable English ivy." He sputtered, spittle flying, the classic mix of panic and indignation. "You'll sue." I shrugged. "You can try." He called the police, of course. By day 2, a squad arrived, officers blinking in confusion as I calmly pointed out the survey stakes marking every inch of my property. Construction was fully within my lines. They left, shaking their heads, leaving Archie muttering and red-faced. Then came the lawyers. Cease and desist letters taped to our apartment door, claiming tortious interference, threats of litigation, and all sorts of fancy words meant to intimidate. I handed them to Tristan, who read through each one with a smirk. He laughed quietly. "Archie doesn't have a case," I said. "We have a permit. We own the land, and in America, there's generally no right to a view unless it's specifically easement protected. He's bluffing. He's trying to scare us." And that was the funniest part. Archie, who had thought himself invincible at the auction, was now scrambling like a school kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The construction continued, measured, deliberate. Every auger drill into the earth, a countdown to the reveal. The first post went in, sinking into the ground with satisfying resistance. A perfect vertical column waiting to support the garden panels. Archie tried shouting over the machines, threats laced with panic, every word ignored by the steady roar of the auger. Each day, the wall rose, the posts piercing the coastal mist, 20 feet of structured inevitability. He brought in family, Aunt Carol leading the charge. They marched across the mud toward me, shrill voices cutting through the wind. Emma rose. "This has gone far enough." Archie is distraught. "You can't do this to him." Carol's hand gestured wildly at the emerging timber structure, her fury palpable. But I stayed seated on the tailgate, calm, collected. I didn't even stand, my boots pressed into the mud, toes touching the edge of my future triumph. Archie hovered near the corner, pale, sweating, phone glued to his hand. He didn't speak, just trembled, realizing the weight of what was happening. I knew every screw, every planter box, every panel placement was perfectly legal. The structure was magnificent, solid, deliberate, and the ivy and climbers would eventually soften the timber, turning it into a vertical garden, a living, breathing obstruction. He had no leverage, no legal recourse, and yet he tried everything: police, lawyers, threats, screaming, even bringing in family. But each attempt crumbled, ineffective. Each day, as the horizontal slats were being installed, the wall grew from an abstract plan into an imposing, undeniable reality. The first few rows of lumber formed the backbone, and soon, climbing frames and planter boxes followed, waiting for the ivy to climb, the flowers to bloom. Archie's panic became almost comical at times. He would pace along his own lawn, gesturing and yelling at nothing, his voice cracking under the stress of being completely powerless. I watched, sipping my coffee, as he made futile phone calls, tried to coordinate contractors, all to no avail. Every escalation from him, a new lawyer, a new threat, was met with calm, measured response from me. I had planned for everything, anticipated every move, and had legal documentation ready for any challenge. By the third day, the wall stretched the full width of the property, solid, towering, every panel meticulously aligned. Archie's family was frantic, messaging, calling, pleading. Aunt Carol, Aunt Dave, even distant relatives chimed in, begging, reasoning, trying to get me to take the wall down. But I stayed on site, directing the placement of the panels, ensuring the irrigation was perfect, that the vertical growth would flourish. And through it all, Archie deteriorated from panic to despair. On the fourth day, he wasn't screaming anymore. He was crying, clutching the timber, realizing that the beautiful, leveraged house he had poured his fortune into was now functionally useless. The ocean, the prized view that had driven his bidding and arrogance, was gone. All that remained was 20 feet of timber, solid, legal, and completely in my control. I watched as he ran frantic calculations in his head, trying to figure out how he could undo it, how he could sue, how he could recover his investment. Every attempt failed. He was trapped by his own overconfidence, his own ignorance of zoning law, and the meticulous planning Tristan and I had executed. And through it all, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not gloating, exactly, but a sense of poetic justice. Every step, from discovering the lot to drafting the designs, forming the LLC, buying the land, and now watching the structure rise, was perfect in its timing and execution. Archie had treated the auction like a game, overbidding without thinking. And now the game had turned. The wall was our move, a silent, unstoppable strategy executed with precision. And as I stood there, overseeing every detail, guiding the placement of the planters, the irrigation, ensuring every slat was straight and true, I realized the comedy of it all. Here was a man who thought he could buy a dream, manipulate others, and walk away victorious, now reduced to panicked, ineffective gestures and impotent threats. The contrast was almost theatrical, tragicomic in its intensity. The final day of construction arrived, and I walked along the length of the wall, checking each section, the planters, the support braces, the irrigation lines. Archie had attempted one last appeal, a phone call to a city investor, a frantic plea to enforce some non-existent easement. None of it worked. The wall was built, fully legal, 20 feet of perfect, imposing timber. On the vista's second floor, I could see him watching, pale and terrified, understanding finally the consequences of his overreach. The juxtaposition of his modern glass palace, built with hubris and arrogance, and the raw, green, living barrier rising before. It was a satisfaction I could barely contain. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to gloat. Each movement of the construction crew, each auger into the ground, each carefully positioned planter box, spoke volumes. Archie's panic, the family drama, the lawyers, the futile police interventions, all of it was a narrative of consequences delivered silently and elegantly. By the end of day 4, the chaos had peaked. The mist had lifted slightly, revealing the full height and span of the structure. It was formidable, functional, and perfect. Archie was reduced to pacing, muttering, clutching his phone, realizing the ocean he had leveraged so heavily against us was now obstructed. And I stood there, calm, triumphant in a quiet, controlled way, knowing every piece had gone exactly as planned, every legal and strategic detail executed flawlessly. The wall wasn't just timber and plants, it was strategy made tangible, patience made visible, and justice, in a sense, made real. The tension had been building for weeks, but nothing compared to that afternoon when the confrontation finally happened. Archie was pacing frantically, phone clutched like a lifeline, muttering about loans, investors, and ruined views. The mist had lifted, leaving the 20-foot wall looming like a silent sentinel between him and his cherished ocean horizon. I knew the investor, Robert Vane, had been contacted by Archie's frantic calls. That call was already scheduled to happen today, and I had every reason to believe it would tilt everything in our favor. Tristan stood beside me, calm as ever, quietly reminding me that patience and precision had gotten us this far. Archie's mother, Aunt Carol, arrived first, handbag clutched, her face a storm of worry and authority. Uncle Dave followed, equally stern. They marched straight to the property line, voices cutting through the coastal wind. "I'm a rose," Carol barked. "This has gone far enough. Archie is distraught. You have to stop this." I stayed seated on the tailgate, boots pressing into the wet grass. Voice calm and steady. "Hello, Aunt Carol," I said. "It's good to see you. And, by the way, you're trespassing. This is lot 4003. Every eye turned to Archie, who was now pale and sweating, phone still glued to his hand. "You brought her here to fight your battle," he hissed under his breath. I ignored him, focusing instead on Carol. I laid it out for her, step by careful step. Archie didn't use his own money to buy this property. I explained. He borrowed against a hard money lender in the city, Robert Vane, and the down payment alone wasn't his. The renovations, the 3-story glass monstrosity, were also leveraged through loans. He had no real equity. Carol. She blinked slowly, processing, the panic in her eyes giving way to dawning comprehension. "Businessmen take loans," she said softly. "That's normal." I shook my head, keeping my voice calm but firm. "He gambled your house, Carol. The collateral isn't just numbers, it's real, tangible equity." And that's when I pulled the folder from my bag. Tristan had already read through every record, and I had printed the relevant deeds, public records, and legal documents. "This is a deed of trust," I said, holding it up. "Recorded 4 months ago. It places a second lien on 42 Maple Drive." Carol's face went white, her grip on her handbag loosening. Archie looked anywhere but at me, muttering excuses, stammering about plans and investments. I continued, ruthlessly calm. "The investor, Mr. Vane, has seen the wall. He knows the house's value is impaired. If the loan isn't repaid immediately, foreclosure happens. Not on this house, on yours. He can call in the full amount." Carol's eyes widened in disbelief, realization settling. Archie hadn't anticipated that the leverage would come back to haunt him. He thought he could play fast and loose, borrowing against family, assuming the view would secure him millions. He miscalculated. I turned my attention to Archie, who was now pale, frantic, and silent. I offered a solution, measured, fair, and strategically satisfying. "I will take the house," I said. "I will assume the mortgage and pay off Vane immediately using my own financing. Your mother's house remains untouched." He looked up, disbelief flashing across his face. What he asked. I repeated it. "I will pay off the debts. That's it. You walk away with nothing, but your mother keeps her home." The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by the distant crash of the Atlantic waves. Archie's mouth opened, then closed. He sputtered, robbed of words. I pulled a prepared contract from my bag. Tristan's brother had drafted it overnight, every clause airtight. "You have until 5 p.m., I said, voice steady. After that, I plant the ivy. His knees went weak, panic flashing across his eyes. He tried to argue, to bargain, to plead, but Carol's stern gaze stopped him cold. "Sign it," she commanded. He looked at her, desperate, realizing that without her, he had nothing. No leverage, no loans he could manage, no family support. She had seen the truth. The arrogance and mismanagement had consequences. Archie crumbled, his golden boy veneer stripped away, revealing the frightened, incompetent child underneath. The pen trembled in his hand as he signed the deed transfer, right on the hood of his flashy lease sports car. "You win," he spat, bitterness and defeat mixing in his tone. I nodded, calm, collected, and returned the signed deed. "I don't plan to rot here," I said. "I plan to garden." The finality of it, the strategic patience, the quiet leverage, it all culminated in that single act. The house was now mine, fully secured, and Archie had no recourse. The weight of satisfaction wasn't gloating. It was the measured pleasure of strategy executed to perfection. Every step, from discovering Lot 43 to carefully planning the vertical garden, had led here. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was precision, patience, and understanding the rules better than anyone else in the room. Archie's face, a mix of shock, disbelief, and helplessness, was the last piece of the puzzle, and in that moment, with the deed in hand, the wall standing firm, and Tristan by my side, I felt an immense, quiet satisfaction. The house, the view, the strategy, it was all ours, legally, impeccably, and completely. This was the culmination of years of planning, research, patience, and skill. Archie had underestimated the power of careful strategy and legal knowledge. And now, finally, he was powerless. The ocean view still beyond his reach, and the house secured in our hands, a testament to patience, intelligence, and subtle unwavering determination. Once we finally had the house in our hands, Tristan and I could breathe a little. Though there was no rest for the wicked, or at least for people who actually wanted their dream home to feel like one. The first thing on our list was that 20-foot wall, the very thing that had caused so much chaos and panic. At first, it felt like it might just loom over the property forever, a monument to spite. But then I started seeing potential. We cut sections out carefully, creating large framed windows that would let light spill through and provide glimpses of the ocean from certain angles. Lattice and climbing hydrangeas filled the voids, softening the rigid timber, weaving life and color into what had once been a tool of strategy. Slowly, the wall transformed from a barrier of revenge into the central feature of a secret courtyard, a sheltered oasis between the house and the sea where wind and prying eyes couldn't reach us. It was ironic, really. Something built for confrontation now felt protective, nurturing, and almost playful. The house itself needed work, too. Archie had turned it into a cold, sterile display of modernism's sleek lines, glass walls, steel floors. Beautiful, in a certain way, but soulless. We replaced the white marble with reclaimed oak floors that creaked softly and radiated warmth. The kitchen, which had looked like a showroom, got navy blue cabinets and butcher block counters, a touch of coziness and practical charm. The master suite, stripped of its aquarium-like exposure, became intimate and cozy, a bedroom where we actually wanted to spend time rather than feel like we were being observed. Each change was small, but together they wove the house into something reflective of us, rather than a cold statement of money. Moving in was a process of ritual, not just logistics. Boxes unpacked, plants positioned, furniture arranged, sunlight considered for every nook. Tristan and I fell into a rhythm, a quiet partnership that had been honed over years of scrimping, planning, and strategizing. Every adjustment, every careful placement was a reclaiming not of money or property alone, but of our own vision and sense of control. Family dynamics started shifting, too. Aunt Carol came over for Christmas dinner that first year. There was an awkward tension at first, a quiet reevaluation of everything, including her own assumptions about Archie's invincibility. The golden boy pedestal had been shattered, and she was learning to navigate without it. But as the evening went on, cocoa in hand, stories and laughter started filling the spaces, and the awkwardness melted away. She noticed the garden wall, now green, alive, and beautiful, no longer a weapon but a protective, nurturing feature. She saw that what we'd built wasn't just about winning a battle, it was about creating a home. Slowly, the family dynamic started to feel more balanced, less about competition and comparison, more about recognition and appreciation. The house itself settled into a rhythm. The climbing hydrangeas grew slowly but steadily, their soft green weaving through the timber lattice, casting gentle shadows on the oak floors inside. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bread. Light spilled in through the windows at just the right angles, and even the smallest details, the slight unevenness in the reclaimed floors, the imperfections in the wood grain added character. The garden wall, once a symbol of strategy and spite, had become a central part of the home's personality, a living, breathing presence that reminded us every day of patience, planning, and the cleverness that had gone into turning the tables on Archie. Evening routines became moments of quiet reflection and satisfaction. Tristan and I would sit together by the windows, looking through the lattice and ivy at the glimpses of ocean beyond. Feeling the privacy and peace we'd created, we'd sip tea, talk about nothing in particular, and let the day settle around us. The satisfaction wasn't loud or boastful. It was quiet, internal, the kind that comes from knowing that the journey, the struggle, the planning, the patience had led to something lasting and right. The property had been transformed. Yes, but more importantly, we had transformed it into a home. Not just with design and structure, but with intention and care. Every corner of the house, every section of the garden wall, every plant climbing toward the sunlight reflected our choices, our style, and our patience. The process was as rewarding as the final product. In quiet moments, we'd lean against the garden wall, watching the waves crash below, listening to the wind through the ivy, and feel a kind of peace that had been impossible during the auction and construction chaos. The house, the courtyard, the wall, it was all ours, truly ours, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually, and practically. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Where there had been tension and betrayal, there was now trust, contentment, and calm. We turned conflict into beauty, chaos into a rhythm of living. Even family began to recognize the difference. The visits were different, the conversations gentler, less competitive. The house was now a safe space, not just for us, but for anyone who came in with care and appreciation. And the satisfaction was subtle but immense. We could have torn the wall down immediately, erased every memory of conflict, but we didn't. We let it stay, a reminder of strategy, patience, and the rewards of careful planning. It had become part of the property's story, integrated with the house, the courtyard, and the ocean view beyond. Tristan and I often joked quietly about how the wall had gone from instrument of revenge to centerpiece of the garden. Every plant, every trellis, every lattice opening had been thought through, carefully placed, and perfectly executed. The ivy climbed, the hydrangeas bloomed, the space breathed. We leaned on the tailgate or curled up in the living room, coffee in hand, feeling the comfort of the home we'd built from chaos and careful planning. The satisfaction wasn't about beating Archie. It was about creating a home, reclaiming a dream, and building a life that felt right. That garden wall, once a symbol of strategy and cunning, had become a sanctuary. Every time we looked out across the courtyard, seeing the interplay of timber, lattice, and greenery, we remembered the journey, what had been lost, what had been planned, and what we had ultimately built for ourselves. The house now felt alive, warm, and human. The light, the textures, the smells, the sounds of the ocean through the gaps in the lattice, all combined into a life that was ours to live. The contrast with Archie's glassbox vision was clear, and we didn't need to mention it. It wasn't about them. It was about us, our choices, our vision, the garden wall, the house, the courtyard, all of it became a physical manifestation of patience, cleverness, and care. Even the little imperfections, the slightly uneven oak planks, the subtle variations in plant growth, added character and authenticity. The home felt lived in and loved, not just built or bought. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting golden light across the ivy and into the rooms. Tristan and I would sit quietly, watching the waves, sipping coffee or tea, feeling the calm and satisfaction of a life finally put together on our terms. The house, the garden, the courtyard, they were ours in every sense. It was a lesson in patience, in careful planning, in reclaiming what was once lost and transforming it into something greater than we could have imagined. And in that quiet, reflective satisfaction, I realized the journey wasn't just about the house or the wall. It was about partnership, strategy, creativity, and the quiet joy of building a life that felt right. Not just looking good on paper. We had won, not just against external forces, but for ourselves. The house was ours, truly, wholly, finally ours. And that's how we turned a crushing loss into something completely ours. The cottage, the garden wall, the view, it all came together with patience, planning, and a little clever strategy. Sitting here now, watching the sun hit the ridge, it feels like home in the truest sense. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment with your thoughts. Maybe share where you'd build your dream view. And if you want more stories like this, consider subscribing. It really means a lot.